You're listening to Radigan's Rockcast, a series focused on talking about music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even current. Now, here's your host, Tom Radigan.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to Radigan's Rockcast. I am, of course, your host, Tom Radigan. Welcome if you are listening to this on WNYO or YouTube or Amazon or Spotify or anywhere on Castos or Anchor. I'm glad that you're on. Let's talk about the 50s of rock and roll. The reason why I call it Radigan's Rockcast. The foundation of rock. And one of those people, the rock and roll pioneers, one of the people that, of course, we've got to talk about, that you probably know who he is, and that's Elvis Presley. He's known as the king of rock and roll. He had a 23-year career. He was one of the most successful entertainers in the industry. Not only was he an interesting performer on stage with his swiveling hips, but he just had an astonishing voice. During Elvis's lifetime, he had sold 1 billion records. He got his start from Sam Phillips at Sun Records in 1954. He recorded Arthur Crudup's song, That's All Right. He then got gigs playing at the Louisiana Hayride until he was discovered by Colonel Tom Parker. He then got signed to RCA Victor. In 1956, he released his first single with RCA, which was Heartbreak Hotel. It got him a number one hit. By that year, he became the biggest thing on the planet. He was adored by teens and outraged by parents. His breakthrough TV appearances happened on television programs such as The Dorsey Brothers Stage Show, The Milton Berle Show, and appeared on Steve Allen, Ed Sullivan, and on Ed Sullivan is where he was shot from the waist up. You know, that's how controversial he was. He also made history by releasing a double A-side single, which was Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel, because most 45s had the A-side, B-side thing. That was different with Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel. Even though Elvis never wrote a song in his life, he knew how a rock song should sound. He also had a good ear when playing instruments. Songs that are just good bops would be Jailhouse Rock and Mean Woman Blues. I also love his softy blues ballad, One Night. In 1958, Elvis was drafted in the Army. However, he still had hit singles that were released during his time of duty. Two of these songs were Now and Then, There's a Fool Such as I, and a Big Hunk of Love. When he returned from the Army, he was bigger than he was before. He still had those hits with songs such as It's Now or Never and Are You Lonesome Tonight. Even though Elvis has been dead for 44 years, his legacy still lives on, with fans still appreciating his music. Now, that was just a little, preamble of who Elvis is. Let me talk about what I think of Elvis and what he has meant to me. I've been an Elvis fan for over 10 years now, and this was, because in 2011, this was the time I was really getting into Elvis, at the end of 2010 and all that stuff, and with the little iPod I had at the time, and YouTube, when YouTube actually did look like a 1950s or 30s radio, and all that stuff. YouTube's logo is not as good as that logo once was. But anyway, that's not the point. So anyway, YouTube just had a bunch of content with Elvis. And at that time, there was a lot from his clips that I saw on him on the Dorsey Brothers Stage Show, which in fact I think is his best appearances. With him and his band, Scotty Moore on guitar, Bill Black on bass, and DJ Fontana on drums. That was the Elvis lineup, with his guitar and all that, and, him doing songs like Heartbreak Hotel on there, Blue Suede Shoes, Baby Let's Play House, Little Richard's Tutti Frutti. I mean, oh, wow. When I listened to that stuff, I was hooked. I was an Elvis fan from that day on, from watching those clips. I was watching anything I could get my hands on of Elvis, especially hearing his first hit, which was That's All Right Mama. That's All Right Mama is just, oh my, and it was his first hit. That was not, it was his first single. That was a hit, but wasn't as big as when he went to RCA Records. So, he did That's All Right when he was on a label called Sun Records, which was a small record label in Memphis, Tennessee, by Sam Phillips and all that. Sam Phillips was a producer that saw something in Elvis, and Elvis was this person who was a white person singing African American music. And, he was somebody who, loved artists such as Roy Brown and Arthur Crudup. And, he was able to, have that style in his songs. And, the thing about rock and roll that's so interesting is that artists like Elvis, Buddy Holly, and other artists like Black and White, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, these guys were pioneers and were doing something that was integrating white and black folks together. That was the interesting thing about rock music. It was doing what, they were just as effective as world leaders. They were putting people together. It was just music you could dance to and have fun with. And, there's so much to say about Elvis Presley's music. I mean, what I can say and speak personally is from stuff I know of Elvis and from, songs of, listening to him from, not just, his hits from, RCA, which my favorites, of course, are from 1956 and 57. But I love listening to songs on Sun Records like That's Alright, Blue Moon of Kentucky, Good Rockin' Tonight, Trying to Get to You. They just have this sound in it that and what's so good about the Sun Records sessions is that the quality is raw compared to especially RCA recordings, but that's what was good about it too. It just showed you you didn't need a rich music quality with Elvis's voice. Elvis just Elvis's voice, it didn't care how it sounded, honestly. And of course it sounded richer when it was Heartbreak Hotel and I Want You, I Need You, I Love You, and Don't Be Cruel. What I will say about Heartbreak Hotel, which I love, is I think that the quality on that, with him playing with Scotty Moore, Bill Black, DJ Fontana, and also being, accompanied by Dudley Brooks on piano, and even Chet Atkins, as well. But, it sounds, that's all you need. When you see the Dorsey Brothers stage show, you see the four of them, Elvis, Scotty, Bill, and DJ, Elvis up front and them on the back and all that stuff, and just the four of them, and that's what rock was, they were the first, that had the, two guitars and the bass and the drums in a sense. That was a style that was then, was something that the Beatles would later claim, as well. All they needed was a small group. And not that I don't like the backing group, the Jordanaires, who played on Don't Be Cruel and I Want You, I Need You, I Love You. But, I always felt that, Elvis's records, he didn't need them. He didn't need those voices in order for it to be a hit single. Elvis could just sing, the heck out of anything. That was what was so incredible about it. And, I mean, of course, the thing that was such an interesting thing about him was this young kid, this young 21-year-old, who was, a heartthrob to the ladies, but man, he was just a guy who just had this voice that just was even though he was young, he had this voice that was just this godly wisdom type of voice. And it's such a it's this wisdom. It was this wiseness. It's I must hear this. This guy has stuff to say. And it shows you. Listen, there can be an artist that you can respect who doesn't write their own music. I can totally respect an artist that doesn't write their own songs. Elvis didn't write a song in his day at all, in the day of his life, he didn't, but he didn't need that, that wasn't something that he needed to prove his talent. He was just an insane performer without it, without the songwriting needed. And like I said, he was also produced his own songs. Stephen Scholes really didn't know how to produce a rock record. Stephen Scholes was the producer for the RCA sessions in 56. But, Elvis knew how it sounded. Elvis worked on that with, his band. And they were the ones that were able to come out with how the record sounded. And, the way you hear that, that it works, of course, why don't we now go into talking about, my favorite essential Elvis songs. So, of course, I mentioned a little bit of Heartbreak Hotel, mentioned a little bit of the double A side of Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel, but, let's talk about Hound Dog, actually, because Hound Dog was written by the duo Lieber and Stoller, Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller. They were a songwriting duo that wrote the song Hound Dog for Big Mama Thornton. And, it was, there was a little bit of difference in the lyrics in that, you ain't nothing but a hound dog snooping around my door. That's how Big Mama Thornton sings it, and Elvis sings it, you ain't nothing but a hound dog crying all the time. Elvis, Elvis is what got their song number one and got it a hit, they had no idea the type of hit Elvis was going to do with that song, and just realized, and Lieber and Stoller worked on other songs from Elvis, too, with Elvis, and stuff like that, like Love Me, Don't, and of course, the fantastic Jailhouse Rock, which we'll get to in a second. But, so yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about Hound Dog, because Hound Dog was just that incredible, rocking style. But the best performance of it is No, Not on Steve Allen. That performance I found out that Elvis was actually humiliated with, which was actually a day before he recorded the song. Steve Allen honestly kind of thought of Elvis as a joke, and he treated him like a joke, basically. He basically, had, when Elvis performed, he had this, sad old basset hound come out, and Elvis had to sing to the dog, and from what I read, Elvis was apparently embarrassed by that and kind of humiliated by it and all that, but also just that poor dog had to go through that too. I mean, if you look at the clip on YouTube of Elvis and that dog looks just depressed. What are you doing, Steve Allen? Why did you do that? Why? But anyway, but the best TV performance of that song was on the Milton Berle Show. Now, this performance, the reason why it's so cool and so phenomenal is because Elvis does something different that he never really did again with that song that made it so, just outstanding. And that is, after, they go through the song, and this was in May of 56, so this was a few months before they actually even, the song was recorded, so they do it, so Elvis gets to the end, you ain't no friend of mine, and, in that fast, the way he does it on the record, and then he just decides to do it slower. And then, it was actually improvised, too. Scotty Moore, Bill Black, DJ Fontana, they had no idea he was going to do that. They all, if you look at the video clip, they all are just wondering, and then they're just in their faces, they'll just go along with it. And the way Elvis just sings that so slowly, and the way he's kind of, playing with his hips, and all that, which, it's hard to really, show how, but, just the way he's doing that, and the way he just plays it so slow, it's like even getting the fangirls to even react even more. What is this guy doing to our hearts, But, that is just one of, I think, the coolest things, honestly, it's just one of the coolest things to see, one of the coolest Elvis clips of all time, I think. It's one of my favorite clips to even just watch. It's just like, it's so fun. It's so fun to see that. So to go on to the next big hit of that song, which was "Don't Be Cruel," which was written by Otis Blackwell, who Otis Blackwell never really got the credit he deserved with songs that he wrote. He wrote another Elvis big hit, which was "All Shook Up," which was one of his big hits in '57, one of the early hits, 1957. And then, of course, the other big hit of '57 was Jailhouse Rock, which was Lieber and Stoller. Jailhouse Rock was for the movie of it. And also, too, an interesting thing about Jailhouse Rock is that, the movie was kind of, that scene in that film was sort of shot as a music video. It looks like a music video. It's so ahead of its time of how they do it, of how Elvis, comes up on the jail cell and then just starts wailing into that ward through a party at the county jail. It's just like, and the way he's just, sitting there with his hips just going like that, ward through a party at the county jail. The prison band was there. They began the wail, just incredible. And just like, and the way, what I love on that too is how that song ends, like the way Elvis just like hollers on it, and it's just like he sings the heck out of it. And of course, like, people say that is one of his best songs of all time, and I'm not gonna lie, of course it probably is one of his best songs. And the way another great thing I love about that song is how it ends. How he just keeps singing those same few lines. Dancing to the Jailhouse Rock, dance to Jailhouse Rock. I'm not doing it justice by talking about it, so you're gonna have to listen to it, just to show how cool and a phenomenon he was for his time and all that stuff. I think Elvis gets overlooked upon, especially in my generation and all that, and kind of gets, is seen as just this guy who was once famous, but nobody knows how much of his presence really dominated, the country, the world, but just, of just what he really brought to rock and roll, what he really brought to music, And songs that I love from Elvis, during, the time when he was drafted into the Army, because, Colonel Tom Parker, his manager, released, had him, have songs that would be released through that time. And, it's good they did that, because it kept Elvis, hot on the charts, that's what it did. And, but one of my favorite songs of that time is "One Night with You," and that was actually recorded before it was even known that he was gonna be into the Army, and that was in February of '57, before Jailhouse Rock actually. And before Jailhouse Rock was recorded, because Jailhouse Rock was recorded April 30th of 1957. So "One Night with You" is just, the reason why this song is just so great is just because it's such a soft bluesy ballad, and Elvis sings it just like his voice, the way he even how hours on it too. And he can go into different ranges. On Hound Dog he goes into a little higher. Don't Be Cruel, he's going in a little lower. And it's just of course one of my favorite Elvis songs too, and that one's not talked about a lot. And I want to actually talk a little bit about "Don't Be Cruel" and Ed Sullivan, because the Ed Sullivan shows, out of all the TV appearances, weren't his best. Like, when I think of Elvis's best TV appearances, that would be Milton Berle, and of course the Dorsey Brothers stage show, which was the best way how Elvis shined. Was if you really want to know how he shined, watch him on the Dorsey Brothers stage show, because then you'll get an idea of what everybody's talking about with Elvis on the Dorsey Brothers stage show. So basically, another thing I would say about Elvis is that when he came back from the army, he had his hits, which I like, like Stuck on You, It's Now or Never, Are You Lonesome Tonight? But, his prime was the 50s. And I would say, actually, his prime would be from, 1954 from the Sun Records to actually 1961, actually, when 1961 was actually his last time he performed before his, 1968 comeback, because around that time in the 60s, that was the years of his movie career. And, it didn't add up to what he did as a musician. And if we want to talk about the films he did, the best films he did was in the 50s. That, like Love Me Tender, Lovin' You, Jailhouse Rock, and King Creole. King Creole is actually one of Elvis's favorite films because it's actually a film where he really actually acts in it. And, of course, they all have great songs in it. But Lovin' You is good. Lovin' You is definitely underrated Elvis film, and that's got, of course, the great classics. Like Teddy Bear, Mean Woman Blues, Got a Lot of Living to Do. Those songs are great. Of course, Jailhouse Rock has Jailhouse Rock, but also Treat Me Nice. And then another great one I love on that one is You're So Square, Baby I Don't Care. And which was another Lieber and Stoller song. And it still surprises me because I'm 22, and in 1957 Elvis was 22. So it's funny how Elvis was, that Elvis was that age, that I'm the same age that Elvis was when he was, in the prime of his life and the biggest successful star on the planet. I mean, without Elvis, there wouldn't have been, rock and roll would have been a lot different without Elvis. That's what I'll tell you. That's it for Radigan's Rockcast today. I'd like to thank you, all of you for watching or listening wherever you are. See you next time. Bye.